Welcome to episode 1 of Unposted. This is a new series I'm trying out on my YouTube channel that takes on topics which are too thoughtful, too layered, or simply too real to survive the LinkedIn algorithm. This is a conversation space for coaches and leaders from across industries to engage in smart, spicy discourse that's rooted in lived experience, serving sharp takes with zero tolerance for cheap shots. I'm Mariana, a first generation professional and former talent development executive who helps other first generation professionals and 21st century leaders navigate complex career environments. And for my very first Unposted, I am so happy and honored to have on with me Jennifer Heitmeyer, who is the former CEO of Vitamin World and a retail strategy expert. She's had decades of experience at companies such as Ralph Lauren, Victoria's Secret, and Bare Minerals before taking the helm at Vitamin World for 5 years. She's also a treasured friend and mentor of mine. Welcome, Jennifer.
I'm trying to do the little heart thing. Thank you so much. I am so psyched to be here and talk to you about this and talk to everybody about this. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so excited to talk to you too, because I think what we're really here to do today is to pour one out for our generation in the workforce, Gen X. And to clarify, Gen X is a completely distinct generation from boomers. We are not the same. And an easy way to remember this is when you do the math, the oldest Gen Xer in 1980 was only 15 years old and too young to vote. So I find that helps in distinguishing us from our elders. But man, Gen X has really taken a beating this year. Our generation has already been feeling the squeeze since the first time the job market tanked in the 2008 financial crisis, and a lot of our 401ks bottomed out then. Many of us were also locked out of the housing market at that time, right? When we were finally ready to buy our first home. So now we're kind of referred to as the sandwich generation. We're acting as financial support for our Gen Z kids who can't earn enough to move out yet, and our boomer and silent gen parents always expected us to support them in old age. So it's leaving us with precious little left over, if anything at all, to save for our own retirement. And this year it hit a new low with the news from the Wall Street Journal and other outlets about how, after decades of reporting to boomer bosses who have kept deferring their own retirement, Gen X is now being passed over for the lucrative C suite promotions they worked their entire careers to earn in favor of their millennial counterparts. So, part of my take today is that Generation X is already a very misunderstood and often dismissed generation in terms of perspective. And lately, it just seems like they can't win for losing. So, what's your take on this?
Oh, I think it's spot on. I'm calling us Gen extremely frustrated because of exactly what you said. I mean, so when I think about the critical competencies for a C-level position, there are a couple that really stand out to me. It's a commitment to having a positive impact, and that's just not on a bottom line. That is on the culture of the workplace as well. I think that's huge. Um, Leading through collaboration with a leadership team, and and part of that is having this level of quiet confidence. And I'm going to loop back to that because I think it's something that is really unique to Gen X. I think being curious with blended sort of tolerance for adaptive risk calculation. I mean, you think about when we were kids, like, okay, let's build a bicycle ramp. We make it too high, we crash, and we end up in the emergency room. That's an adaptive risk calculation. So, you bring that forward with you throughout your life. And then I think the last one is this concept of valuing delayed gratification. And that sounds a little weird, but again, we grew up, you go to the mall, you get an allowance, you save so you can buy that pair of sneakers or whatever it was you wanted. That led to a generation of people who make really good decisions and have a good understanding of realistically how long something's going to take. So another component of that is, I think, a level of leadership courage that you have to have because, especially at C-suite, you're going to be telling a board, I know you want results in Q4. I do too, but that's not real. It's going to be in Q2. So I think we grew up developing all of those things naturally. It was part of who we were. It shaped who we became as humans. And when you add to that, we were the generational cohort that took the world from analog to digital. And we did it while we were working. So whenever I hear anybody say, oh, well, Gen X isn't quite as technologically adept at the, millennials or Gen. No, I'm sorry. I am calling BS on that. It is not the case. So we learned this stuff growing up. We've honed it through 30-year careers. And not only have we seen the movie about evolving technology, we played the starring role in that. So now, when we're able to give all of that back to the workplace, it's like we don't have the opportunity. And I think it's that quiet confidence that's biting us in the butt here. Because we grew up autonomously. We weren't getting trophies for just doing it. We were just doing it. There was no one who was, we never advocated for ourselves. So now it feels like we're getting passed over for these positions, not because we're not good enough, but because we're not loud enough. And that's my take on what's happening to Gen X. Thoughts?
I mean, there's so much that I identify with in what you've just said, and I share a lot of that take that you have. Um, I think there's a couple of things going on that I am also observing in tandem with what you are observing. Um, a couple of things you said really kind of gave me insight into this whole technology piece because that was part of the Wall Street Journal article. Is that the perception is that boomers now having deferred their retirement into their 70s and sometimes 80s perceive millennials to be digital natives and that they can pick up on technology much more quickly than their Gen X counterparts. To your point, completely forgetting about the fact that we were the ones that taught boomers how to use the internets when it came out in the 90s and they were completely befuddled as to what this technology was supposed to mean. We came in and we kind of showed them the ropes on how to navigate that, and then we took it to the next level. And I think people forget that a lot of the technology we rely on today were actually started by Gen X individuals. Google was started by Larry Page and Sergey Brin, I think, if I'm not mixing those names up. But, they're both Gen Xers, and it was Google, if you think about it, is like the ultimate Gen X product, which is like, go find it yourself, go do it yourself, go take care of it yourself. Like, it's the ultimate search engine that we wish we would have had growing up, right? When nobody was around to tell us what to do.
Encyclopedia Britannica.
Exactly. It's like, if you didn't have one of those, well, good luck to you. But it was, I think that idea of like, not only are we resilient and everybody, touts us for our grit and stick with itness and all of that, but I think that we're also skeptical to a degree. And we just don't buy into every new piece of technology that comes down the pike because it's new. Like, we want to test it. We want to play around in it. We want to understand the inner workings of it before we come to a conclusion about whether it's actually moving the needle in the right direction or not. I think that's a moment we're at right now with AI, where, the perception is that, oh, well, only millennials and Gen Z understand it. And I think that it's a lot of Gen X that's in the guts of AI right now going, yes, this has promise. There are uses, but this is by no means ready for prime time. And we should certainly not be like reshaping entire organizations around it at this moment. So I think that that kind of like skepticism and prudence and like, yeah, let's embrace this and, let's just not run ripshod over something because we're excited about it, right? Like, I think that we have that discernment and it doesn't, for some reason, that's not translating. Now, it could, we're a smaller generation and it's a numbers game. It always has been. We're dwarfed by these two giant generations that each of them is easily twice the size of ours. So we've been drowned out on either side of the timeline. But, in that, I think that there's been a lot of misunderstanding and missed opportunity about what we bring to the table. So I don't know if you have any thoughts that you'd want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to make a couple of notes as you were talking. I could not agree with you more. I mean, it goes back to that adaptive risk calculation that I was talking about when it comes to AI. Yes, this is an awesome tool. How do we use it? And something else that as I've been thinking about things, following the news, what's happening in the world, um, on all fronts, it also feels a little bit like Gen X was sort of the last generation that was taught critical thinking skills in school. We were still taught, not about it wasn't about rote memorization. It was about how do you learn something, how do you use your noodle, how do you question, how do you use your brain to determine, ah, is this something I should take at face value? Or is this something about which I have more questions? I need to be more skeptical. I need to do more research. Not saying it's wrong, not saying it's bad, saying, is this true? Is this real? How can I best use this? And I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think our generation, and also you mentioned being the sandwich generation, we're flipping busy. We've got kids on one end, we've got parents on the other end. We are working and we are taking care of ourselves and we are involved in projects. God, give me anything that can make my life easier. Yes, I will embrace it entirely. But with that, there also is a modicum of thoughtful deliberation. Is this infallible? Shall I just look at what this has served up to me and say, awesome sauce, I'm taking it for what it is? No, I don't think so. And it concerns me that subsequent generations are going to further lose the capability to look at information and question, to come up with creative ideas and use AI to potentially flesh it out, to potentially point out pitfalls or blind spots. Again, back to how can we contribute in the workforce? We can teach them those things. So that's how I think about AI and our relationship with it across the generations.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, because I do want to acknowledge that this is a painful moment for Gen X. Currently, our generation is experiencing the deepest cuts in the current layoffs that are happening in the workforce. People between the ages of 50 and 60 are being released at, a higher rate month over month because the perception is that, well, they can't adapt to this new technology. Plus, they've been in the workforce for a long time and they're really expensive and they're probably going to be checking out in 10 years anyway. Like all these excuses, right? So I want to acknowledge the frustration and the pain that a lot of careerists in our generation are feeling right now because I'm just going to say it. I don't know that people realize we have been reporting to boomers for our entire careers. And at the 11th hour to be like, Nope, we're not going to give you that final promotion. We're going to give it to the person that you've groomed for the past 5 years, right?
Mhm.
That's tough. That is really hard, and I think that people aren't really recognizing that, um, and what that does to someone's identity, and also their security, in knowing that they'll be able to care for themselves once they're no longer able to work. Like we're being kind of cut off at the knees at the most vulnerable time in our career when we have the most earning potential.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to dismiss that. I don't want to overlook it because I feel like it's underreported, that aspect of it. But at the same time, I want to make it very clear that um, I wish millennials well. I've been working with millennials for the better part of 15 years now, and I see a lot of promise in that generation. And they're smart and they're capable. And I think it's less that because many of them did receive schooling in critical thinking. I think, though, as particularly maybe in the last 25 years, as real life has kind of moved from offline to online, there is a different level of rigor that goes into things like, you know, fact checking and kind of the appetite to not cut corners in the pursuit of excellence has diminished quite a bit. And there's a lot of factors to that. I'm not implying that it's about character or intelligence at all, at all. But I do want to also call it out that this is a true thing as well. This is something that we're observing. So, how do we kind of meet in the middle and close that gap? Because I do think that with all of their strengths and all of their promise, something that millennials lack, and I see this even more in Gen Z, is they're rather risk averse. They prefer certainty. They prefer guarantees. They are not as comfortable moving without having all of the information, right? And in a way, I think that kind of gives boomers some reassurance, like that they're not going to go running off to the races before they're ready. But at the same time, I think that, it's gonna kind of put millennials in a conundrum, I think, in terms of, the rapid pace that they're being expected to achieve, and this kind of push and pull with the reticence to make a mistake or to, move without full context, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if there's anything in here that you also are observing or wanna comment about.
Yeah, and that I think is contributing another level to the frustration that Gen X has. So 1,000% agree with your validation of the point that it is frustrating to be this age right now. I mean, and heck, I'll speak from personal experience. I would love to work again because I love what I do. I would love to work for a company. I mean, God knows I'm keeping myself busy. I'm busier than I ever have been, and engaging in not-for-profit things that I can be helpful in that way. But exactly what you just said is another reason why I want to continue working to help the millennials further develop, to help Gen Z. Dear God, something like only 6% of Gen Z workers identify a leadership position as something they aspire to. Now, someone or something is going to have to demonstrate, guys, being a leader is great. You have the ability to have such a positive impact. That is, again, I feel where Gen X is perfectly suited to do that. And and we are at the perfect stage in life because when you look at what is happening in the world, as you mentioned, boomers are delaying retirement until they're 80.
Yeah.
I mean, Gen X, you got us for another 15 years. Let's use that time. Let's use it well to benefit both the next crop of leaders and get them ready for the C suite and contribute what we know to the overall organizations. I want to tear my hair out. Like, please just allow us to give what we've been working 30 years toward giving.
Yeah. And to be compensated fairly for it.
Well, yeah,
Right? I
yeah.
mean, that's another thing that I think is unfairly leveraged against Gen X. And, part of the conversation that doesn't come up a lot is because many of us started our careers either right before or at the onset of the internet. There weren't resources to check like what is market rate for X position in X city. I mean, you really had to know people in very specific circles to come across that information. And so therefore, I mean, speaking for myself, I was radically underpaid for like the first 10 years of my career, maybe not quite that long, but close to it,
Hmm.
because I didn't know where the baseline started.
Hmm.
So I was underpaying myself and never even realized that, I was working for pennies on the dollar compared to other people in my role. So it was, yeah, an eye-opening moment for me to kind of to realize that. But um I
Oh, and then
think
we
that
got smoked by the Great Recession. So there was another right in the middle of prime earning years. And I know there was tremendous impact on Gen X during that time as well. So that's a double whammy. You started low, you got smacked again. And now suddenly, when we have the opportunity to be contributing and
Yeah.
be compensated accordingly. It's, yeah, no thanks.
And, if I could, and this is good, was going to be my last and final question to you around, kind of this moment that we're in, because you've made it a point a few times now to kind of say like how important it is that we help steward the next generation of leaders, by imparting what we've learned, what we've, kind of come to achieve, and how. If there was something that you could, if there was like one thing that you could instill in every future millennial that's about to step into a C-suite role, from your experience and your lens of expertise, what would that one thing be that you'd want them to carry forward?
Listen, listen to your team. Listen to people on the front line with your customer. Listen to your customers and don't be afraid to be wrong. Um,
Ah,
em- Embrace it. Encourage robust dialogue. Start every start every meeting with, I do not have all of the answers. That's why you all are here. I think the strongest leaders are the ones who say, I don't know.
so
That
powerful.
is hands down my advice.
And it demonstrates, especially in this moment, leadership, courage,
Mm,
bravery to stand up and say, that was a bad call and the buck stops with me, so I'll own it. Like that is becoming a lost art. And, in terms of what you were saying, like it's so important for them to listen. I couldn't agree more. I would say that, from my end, what I would also ask them to consider, well, actually, two things. One, inspired by what you said, is, in order to really embrace intellectual humility and demonstrate aspirational leadership, it's going to be necessary to reckon with their perfectionism, which I think a lot of millennials are just, they were held to very high expectations their whole lives. They, believe that accomplishment is very central to their identity. Um, and I think that sometimes that perfectionism gets in the way of them showing up bigger. So that would be one thing that I would want to impart to them. But I think that the bigger thing is to learn from the mistakes of the boomers. And there were a lot that they fumbled in this era, uh, in terms of like how they passed the torch, completely locking out a generation in of their prime earning years, where they're really the purpose of working from ages 50 to 65 is like, this is really now when ideally you've taken care of your children, your parents are settled and you're saving for your own retirement so that you can support yourself when you're no longer able to work. And that has been completely, for the most part, erased for Gen X. So for millennials, I would encourage them to not repeat the mistakes of their forebearers and to look at Gen Z and say, you know what? We've championed work life balance. We have, brought the commitment of human centered leadership into the workplace. Like now let's practice the art of gracefully knowing when to step aside and, thinking about your legacy and not just what your quarterly results are going to post. I think that is going to be critical for millennials to embrace. um, you know, kind of don't do what boomers did to Gen X, and throw your succeeding generation, which would be Gen Z, under the bus, when they're really ready to step into the roles that you're taking now. That would be my call to millennials as they're moving into this new phase of their career.
I think those are brilliant observations. They're very insightful, and I think they're going to be super challenging for the millennials, specifically because of the statement you made. Be thinking not just about your results, because we all know we're in business. We're not 501(c)(3s. We've got to deliver results. Think about your legacy. I think, to the point that you made, millennials, their identity can be very tied into their accomplishments. So, how do you coach someone to say, okay, excellent, you did a good job here. Life is more than the number. Life is about how you got the number. Life is about what you're doing to help the folks who are coming behind you have the experience, have the opportunity to hit the number. And I think that's going to be interesting, which again comes back to, damn it, it's something Gen Z could really be helping, or Gen X could really be helping with. We're really good coaches.
So I'll actually I take it back. That will be my last question to you. If Gen X, if their chapter is being rewritten in real time and we're not going to, be able to ascend to the levels that boomers before us were able to reach, what does leadership look like for us in this age? How do we pivot and how do we continue to show up for our millennial and Gen Z counterparts?
I think it's what we've done all of our lives from the time we were the first latchkey kids, right? Nobody had really done that before. So, well, we figured it out. I think we figure it out now. And it's as I mentioned, I'm becoming highly involved with not-for-profits. And how do you apply a for-profit lens to a not-for-profit operating model? How do you apply a for-profit strategic lens to a not-for-profit fundraising model? It's been fascinating and very interesting. So that's how I'm going at it. I'm sure there will be people who open their own businesses, who start doing their own consulting, coaching. It's it's so critical. And like I said, we've done it before. We're we're the generation that can say, "Yeah, I'll figure it out. I don't have any idea what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out because there's nobody here who's going to show me how. It's up to us again. So we'll do it again."
So what I'm hearing is that um, you see, I think what you're saying is that you see an opportunity for Gen X to really kind of step into their rightful roles at this stage in their lives as thought leaders
Mhm.
and, impart that knowledge in maybe untraditional ways. But I think also it would be maybe incumbent upon us if we're thinking about not repeating the mistakes of our elders, in which case boomers are still our elders too, um, to really have the discipline to continually check in on our own knowledge and make sure it's still applicable. Because the way that not only organizations are changing, but the nature of leadership is changing in this moment. I just taped a different clip about that. But I feel like it's incumbent upon us to check our own knowledge and really make sure that what we are lending to others is updated and relevant to the world that they're living in now and not do what boomers did to us, kind of circling back to the first part of our conversation, which is, just keep your head down and work hard and someone will notice and you got promoted and don't worry about it. It's like, that was terrible advice. Not for them, because that actually worked for them. They didn't really have to navigate the same complexities, right? But I think about that a lot. Like, I don't want to be giving outdated advice for a new world. And I think maybe that's kind of the space that we all collectively can own and start to shape and say, well, this is how we marry the expertise of the past with the realities of the new.
Oh, 100%. The rapidity with which the world is changing. If someone says, "What's your long-term plan?" Good God, a long-term plan at this point is 6 months because
Like
who
that.
the hell knows what's going to happen? So yeah, the we all must be responsible for remaining aware and engaged and curious about what is happening and how people are thinking about it, and how people, regardless of generation to some degree, are thinking about it. Because the other thing that I do want to make sure that I convey is, when I talk about millennials or Gen Z or Gen X and boomers, I recognize these generations are not monolithic. There are
Absolutely.
certainly boomers who behave just the way Gen Z does, and Gen Z who behave the way millennials do. And so I think that's um, an important point to make. But we're all responsible for remaining current.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you made that point because Well, yes, there's always exceptions to the rule. There is also weight in generational theory. And, I bet if you ask any Gen Zer in 20 years what defined them as a generation, they're going to talk about this moment. They're going to talk about not being able to find good paying jobs. They're going to talk about having gone to school for, 8 years and coming out and still working, in a soda shop or, oh my God, soda shops. Does anybody even use that term anymore? I'm really dating myself. It's like, it's everything that your age cohort experiences together that shapes you. It really does help to tweak your mindset and your perspective. So I do think that the observations that we've talked about today, while they are generalizations, they do apply to a lot of
Mm.
individuals across the 3 cohorts we've really been discussing, which is Gen X, I'm sorry, boomers and millennials. So, there's truth to all of it, but I guess that's it. It's like finding the germ of truth in all of the speculation that continues to be our work.
Yeah. And you do it by listening, being curious, asking questions, using your noggin.
And showing up with intellectual humility and bravery.
Yes.
Um, we desperately need that in this moment, I think for all of us to commit to that. But Jennifer, thank you so much for making the time for this conversation. I was so looking forward to chatting with you, and you did not disappoint. I hope that you'll consider coming back sometime and chatting about something else at length.
Would love to. This is great. Mariana, love it. I can't wait to see all of your sessions that you do. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much. And if you've been watching, thanks for staying till the end. And we'll see you on the next episode of Unposted.